Usually when we talk about a medical emergency, there's this expectation of like precision.
Right, like an engineering project.
Yeah, exactly. Like you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points and says, there it is.
It's binary. I mean, it's broken or it's not broken. We really like things to be visible and, easily categorized.
We do, but then you step into the world of illicit drug overdoses today, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just completely broken. We're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is, honestly, it's murky.
Oh, absolutely.
Because right now, the illicit drug supply is undergoing this rapid, almost totally invisible chemical arms race. And the antidotes that first responders have relied on for decades are, well, they're suddenly failing.
Yeah, the threat is entirely in the shadows now. And I think it's important to establish that this isn't just some, clinical problem for doctors or biochemists to debate in a lab.
Yeah.
Because these new chemicals are being laced into counterfeit prescription pills and everyday vapes. So this is really about what happens if, say, your teenager hits a friend's vape, thinking it's totally harmless, and suddenly stops breathing. Understanding how this new chemistry operates is your best defense.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have a pretty thick stack of sources for our deep dive today. We're looking at medical reviews, health advisories, pharmacology papers. But before we can even begin to understand the new threats hitting the streets, we have to understand the baseline.
We do.
And our current baseline for extreme potency is fentanyl.
Right, and if we look at the comprehensive medical review from the journal ACS Chemical Neuroscience, it's a paper called Dark Classics in Chemical Neuroscience, we see that fentanyl actually rose to prominence about 50 years ago.
Okay.
It was originally developed as a highly effective synthetic alternative to morphine, and in a strictly controlled clinical setting, its extreme potency is just an incredible tool for managing severe, persistent pain like what a cancer patient might experience.
Sure, that makes sense.
But the exact same chemical mechanics that make it work so well in a hospital are what make it incredibly fatal on the street.
And to really grasp why it's so potent and, why it is so tricky for the human body to process, we need to look at how it is legally prescribed.
Yeah, the patch.
Exactly. The official FDA prescribing information for Duragesic, which is the brand name for the fentanyl transdermal system, or the patch, it details some truly fascinating biological mechanics. Because the patch isn't just pumping medicine straight into a vein like an IV drip.
No, not at all.
It's designed to deliver fentanyl continuously for 72 hours. And the way it does that is by utilizing the physical structure of your skin.
Yeah, it goes deeper than just sitting on the skin surface. The patch creates what pharmacologists call a depot effect.
A depot effect.
Yeah. Fentanyl is highly lipophilic, which simply means it loves fat and cellular tissues. So the patch drives the drug into the upper layers of the skin absorbs it, and this highly concentrated pool of fentanyl just sits there in the lipid layers. From that physical reservoir in your tissue, it just slowly and steadily leaches into your systemic blood circulation over 3 days.
But here is a crucial and honestly alarming detail from that exact FDA warning label. Because the delivery system relies on the skin's natural permeability, anything that changes your skin temperature completely alters the math.
It changes everything, yeah.
The label explicitly warns that exposing the patch to heat dramatically increases skin permeability. And we aren't just talking about like a heating pad or a hot tub.
No, even your own body can do it.
Right. If you are sick and develop a high core fever of 104 degrees Fahrenheit, your blood vessels dilate, the lipid barrier shifts, and the release of the drug drastically accelerates. Your own body heat can trigger a sudden, potentially fatal overdose from a patch you've been wearing safely for a whole day.
The physical environment of the patient actually dictates the drug's behavior. And because of this lipophilic skin depot effect, the danger doesn't just stop the second you rip the patch off your arm.
Because it's already in the tissue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even after removal, the physical reservoir of the drug that is pooled in your skin tissue continues to absorb into the blood. The pharmacokinetic data, which is really just the measurement of how a drug moves through and exits the human body, shows that it takes a full 17 hours for the serum fentanyl concentrations in the blood to fall by just 50%.
Wow, so a fentanyl patch is basically like a slow drip coffee maker for your nervous system, but if you apply heat, it suddenly turns into a concentrated espresso shot.
That's a great way to put it.
And even if you unplug the machine entirely, there's still coffee in the filter slowly dripping down for another 17 hours.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, this lingering, powerful effect in the body is exactly what makes treating synthetic opioid overdoses so incredibly difficult. We are dealing with chemicals that establish a long-term physical presence in human tissue.
So, if fentanyl's potency and its tendency to linger in the body's fat for days is already a medical nightmare, what happens when the illicit drug market wants something even stronger?
Well, the illicit market is a business, right?
Hmm.
And it is constantly looking for ways to bypass international regulations, lower their manufacturing costs, and crucially, increase potency so they can traffic smaller, less detectable packages.
Makes sense from a smuggling perspective.
Right, and they found a new vehicle to do exactly that.
Enter the Nitazenes. We're pulling this directly from a really concerning March 2026 health advisory issued by the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services. Nitazenes are an emerging category of synthetic opioids.
Chemically known as 2-benzylbenzimidazoles.
Yeah, and the wild part, they aren't even new. They were actually originally developed back in the 1950s by pharmaceutical researchers.
What's really fascinating here is that they were never approved for human medical use in the United States.
Ooh.
Never. The researchers shelved them in the 50s because the safety concerns were just way too high. And when you look at the math, you instantly understand why. The potency of these compounds is terrifying.
Just how strong are we talking?
Some nitazene analogs are 5 to over 10 times more potent than fentanyl.
Wow.
Yeah, and when you compare them to a traditional opioid, they are hundreds of times more potent than morphine. A quantity so microscopic that you can barely see it with the naked eye has a massive clinical effect. It shuts down the respiratory system almost instantly.
But it's not just the sheer strength that makes them so dangerous, right? It's the stealth factor.
Yes, the stealth factor is huge. Nitazenes are structurally distinct from traditional opioids like heroin or morphine, and their chemical architecture is completely alien to fentanyl.
Meaning they don't look the same under a microscope.
Exactly. Standard drug tests operate on a lock-and-key mechanism. They're looking for the specific molecular shape of fentanyl or heroin. Because nitazenes belong to this unique 2-benzylbenzimidazole class, they just don't fit the lock.
So they just don't show up.
They are totally invisible to standard hospital drug screenings. And even more alarming for harm reduction, they do not trigger standard fentanyl test strips.
That is terrifying.
Right. A user could test their supply, get a negative result, think they are perfectly safe, and still ingest a lethal dose of a nitazene.
And the users truly have no idea they are taking it. The Missouri Health Advisory spells out exactly where these chemicals are showing up. They are being laced into counterfeit prescription pills, things pressed in clandestine labs to look exactly like a pharmaceutical Xanax or Percocet.
Yeah, the counterfeit market is flooded.
And they are being found in unregulated cannabis products. And perhaps most concerning for parents and communities, they are now emerging in everyday vapes.
The statistics on the ground are really grim, and they are escalating rapidly. According to the Missouri State Unintentional Drug Overdose Reporting System, or SUDORS, there were 14 overdose deaths, specifically involving nitazenes captured in just the first few months of 2024.
Just the first few months.
Yes. And to put that in perspective, that is 3 times the combined number of nitazene deaths from the previous 5 years.
Oh my God.
And it's likely a massive undercount because standard postmortem toxicology doesn't even routinely look for them. In 2025, Missouri launched a pilot program testing the wastewater in public schools. Since January of that year, they found nitazenes in the wastewater of 26 out of the 37 participating schools.
Okay, wait, let me push back on that for a second. If these chemicals are totally invisible to standard drug screenings and standard fentanyl test strips, how do we even know they're in the middle school wastewater to begin with? I mean, how are they finding them?
That is the exact reason the 2025 Missouri Department of Public Safety pilot program was launched.
Yeah.
They aren't just dipping standard off-the-shelf drug tests into the wastewater.
Right, that wouldn't work.
Exactly. They're using highly specialized targeted laboratory analysis, specifically mass spectrometry. Mass spectrometry is essentially a way of weighing and identifying the unique chemical fingerprints of molecules. The labs have to specifically configure their multi-million-dollar equipment to hunt for the specific alien markers of nitazenes.
So it's very intentional.
Very. It's a proactive surveillance program designed to identify community drug trends before they show up as fatalities in the emergency room. And finding it in 26 out of 37 schools proves these synthetics are circulating widely among youth populations who likely think they are just hitting a regular flavored vape.
It's a terrifying thought, and this chemical evolution leads us directly into our next major problem, which is the antidote dilemma. If someone drops from one of these super drugs, whether it's fentanyl or a nitazene, the go-to emergency response is naloxone, which most people know by the brand name Narcan.
Right, Narcan.
But when we look at the sources, we see the fatal flaw in the timing of how these drugs interact in the human body.
Yeah. Naloxone is often called a miracle drug, and for really good reason. It is an opioid receptor antagonist. To understand that, you have to picture the mu receptors in your brainstem as these central circuit breakers that control your breathing. Opioids flip those breakers off.
Okay, so the breathing stops.
Right. Naloxone rushes into the brain, physically kicks the opioid molecules off those mu receptors, flips the breakers back on, and restores normal breathing.
It's an instant reset.
But the DHSS advisory notes that because nitazenes are so incredibly strong, they bind to those receptors with immense force. A single standard dose of naloxone often simply isn't enough to kick them off. First responders and bystanders are being advised to administer a dose, wait 2 to 3 minutes, and if the person isn't breathing, hit them again.
But the deeper problem isn't just about how many doses you need in the first 5 minutes of an emergency. To understand the real lingering danger, we have to look at a 2022 Emergency Medical Services study out of Oregon Health and Science University.
Right, the OHSU study. It really highlights the fundamental pharmacokinetic mismatch between the poison and the cure. Naloxone is engineered to work incredibly fast, getting into the brain in seconds, which is exactly what you want when someone is turning blue. But the biological trade-off for that speed is that it metabolizes and wears off incredibly fast. The half-life of naloxone is only 30 to 81 minutes. Meanwhile, as we learned from the Duragesic label, synthetic opioids are lipophilic. They pool in the fat. They stick around in the body's tissues for hours, sometimes days, slowly releasing back into the bloodstream.
And the EMS study gives us some staggering statistics on how this mismatch plays out in the real world. In an urban fire-based EMS system, researchers found that a massive 42.1% of patients who were successfully revived with pre-hospital naloxone by paramedics ended up refusing transport to the emergency room.
A huge number.
Wait, 42%? Almost half the people whose lives were just saved refused to go to the hospital. Why? I mean, are they just in denial about what happened?
It's much more visceral than denial, honestly.
Yeah.
It's a profound physiological shock. We have to look at what naloxone actually does to an opioid-dependent brain. When you violently kick every opioid molecule off the receptors all at once, you plunge the patient into immediate, agonizing, precipitated withdrawal. They wake up from the overdose covered in sweat, their muscles are cramping, they might be vomiting, and their brain is screaming in panic.
So they wake up in sheer agony.
Pure fight-or-flight state. So when the paramedics ask them to get in the back of an ambulance, their only biological imperative is to get away or to go find more opioids to stop the physical agony. So they sign a refusal of medical care.
And that refusal creates a ticking time bomb. Because they refuse transport, they aren't being medically monitored. An hour goes by, the naloxone metabolizes and completely clears out of their system.
But the opioid is still there.
Exactly. The fentanyl or the nitazene hasn't gone anywhere. It's still leaching out of their tissues and circulating in their blood. The researchers found that these patients who refused transport had a hazard ratio of 1.66 for a subsequent EMS encounter where naloxone had to be administered all over again. They were essentially re-overdosing on the exact same drug they took hours ago.
The medical term for this is re-narcotization. The naloxone wears off, the lingering synthetic opioid floods back onto the unprotected mu receptors, the circuit breakers in the brainstem flip off again, the respiratory system shuts down, and unless someone happens to be standing there to administer a second round of naloxone, it's fatal.
Here's where it gets really interesting. So naloxone, as we currently use it in the field, is essentially just a biological snooze button. It wakes your respiratory system up for an hour, but the opioid is still sitting there waiting for the alarm to go off again.
That's exactly. And this raises an important question. If the illicit drug supply is rapidly shifting toward these synthetic compounds that stay active in the body for 24 to 72 hours, how can emergency medicine possibly keep up?
Right.
We just don't have enough paramedics to stand over a patient, hitting a biological snooze button every 45 minutes for 3 days straight.
So if the fundamental problem is the incredibly short half-life of our rescue drug fighting against the massive half-life of these new synthetic threats, how do we stretch the cure? I mean, how do we make the snooze button last for days?
Pharmacologists have been obsessing over this exact timing mismatch, and they recently figured out a way to physically trap the antidote inside a microscopic, slow-dissolving cage. We're looking at a brilliant 2021 paper published in the journal ACS Pharmacology and Translational Science, detailing a groundbreaking medical countermeasure. It's called covalently loaded naloxone nanoparticles. or CNLX-NP for short.
This is where the science gets almost science fiction. Can you break down exactly what they built in that lab?
Sure. At the molecular level, the researchers created a tiny biodegradable polymer scaffold. The specific material is polylactic co-glycolic acid, or PLGA.
PLGA, okay.
To visualize it, think of it like a microscopic sponge designed to dissolve very, very slowly in the human body. Then, through a specific chemical reaction, they took active naloxone molecules and covalently linked them, meaning they chemically welded the drug directly to the ends of the polymer chains within this sponge.
They welded the medicine to the sponge.
Exactly. The final product is a nanoparticle, where about 7% of its total weight is pure naloxone.
Wow. Because the naloxone is physically welded to the structure of the slow-dissolving sponge, the body can't clear it out in an hour. It has to wait for the sponge to break down.
That's the brilliance of it.
And the published results of this mechanism are astounding. By linking the drug to this nanoparticle, they extended the elimination half-life of naloxone to be 34 times longer than a standard high dose.
34 times longer changes the entire landscape of emergency response. In their rat models, they demonstrated that a single intramuscular injection of these covalently loaded nanoparticles provided continuous protection against fentanyl-induced respiratory depression for up to 48 hours, one shot, and the brain's mu receptors are physically guarded for 2 solid days.
So what does this all mean? If you inject a patient and keep them in a blocked naloxone state for a full 48 hours, doesn't that throw them into a severe, prolonged withdrawal? I mean, going back to the Duragesic warning label, abrupt opioid withdrawal causes vomiting, severe chills, muscle aches, intense anxiety. You are chemically locking them into that agonizing fight-or-flight state for 2 days.
It's a brutal reality, yes. Precipitating withdrawal is the immediate, unavoidable consequence of administering an antagonist to an opioid-dependent person.
So they just have to suffer for 48 hours.
A 48-hour block would mean an incredibly uncomfortable, profoundly distressing 48 hours for the patient. But we have to view this through the lens of harm reduction and pure survival. Remember that 42.1% transport refusal rate we discussed.
Right.
First responders are dealing with a treat-and-release reality on the streets. If the alternative to a 48-hour withdrawal is a fatal Nitazene reoverdose 1 hour after the paramedics drive away, that prolonged discomfort is a life-saving trade-off.
It buys them the time they need to survive.
Yes. It guarantees the patient's respiratory system stays online long enough for the lipophilic synthetic opioids to naturally clear out of their fat and tissue.
It's choosing a brutal 2 days over not surviving the night. It really puts the severity of this chemical arms race into perspective. We've covered a massive amount of ground today, from the physical mechanics of skin patches to the molecular architecture of invisible synthetics. And I want to bring it all together and remind you why this matters.
It matters to everyone.
It really does. The illicit drug supply has fundamentally changed. What looks like a harmless vape being passed around or a seemingly standard prescription pill offered at a party could actually contain a 1950s synthetic chemical that is hundreds of times stronger than morphine. These chemicals are invisible to standard drug tests and highly resistant to our standard antidotes. In this new landscape, your knowledge and your awareness are your very first lines of defense.
Practically speaking, if you ever suspect someone is experiencing an overdose, if their breathing is shallow, if they're unresponsive, or if their skin is pale and clammy, always administer naloxone if you have it. As the Missouri Health Advisory stresses, naloxone will not hurt them if opioids aren't present.
Better safe than sorry.
Absolutely. But if they are dealing with a fentanyl or nitazene exposure, it could buy them the critical minutes they need for EMS to arrive. You might have to give multiple doses, and you must stay with them, but you can save a life.
That's the most important takeaway.
It is. And, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. Building on that amazing nanotechnology paper we just explored.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
We just spent a lot of time talking about using 48-hour nanoparticle naloxone to reverse an active lethal overdose. But if we can safely engineer an antagonist to sit in the body and block opioid receptors for days at a time, could this exact same nanotechnology eventually be used as a preemptive vaccine for high-risk individuals?
Wait, a vaccine for addiction?
Imagine a monthly injection that makes it biologically impossible to overdose or even to feel the euphoric effects of a relapse because the receptors are already guarded. It completely flips the script on how we might treat and manage addiction in the future.
That is an incredible prospect and something to definitely keep an eye on as this nanotech science develops. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Stay curious and please stay safe out there because, as we've learned today, the world of medical emergencies and drug exposures isn't a clean binary x ray anymore. The machine is broken, the landscape is murky, and the best way to navigate those diagnostic muddy waters is to keep yourself informed.